Tēnā koutou Aotearoa. Welcome to the BYC Podcast, a special edition post-mortem show coming to you from the Export Beer Garden studio on a Friday after one of the saddest weeks in recent New Zealand cricket history. You can hear the strains of Henry Purcell's achingly sad Dido's lament accompany today's podcast as we look back on yesterday's defeat at the hands and bats of the tournament hosts West Indies and reflect on what I'm going to say is probably New Zealand's worst ever performance at a T20 Cricket World Cup. It is right down there with not making it out of the group stages in 2009 with a squad captained by Daniel Vettori, featuring Brendan Diamante, Peter McGlashan, and Ian O'Brien. In fact, in the 8 T20 World Cup tournaments since the inaugural one in 2007, we've been runner-up once, knocked out in the semis 3 times and made the Super 8 or Super 10 3 times, KO'd in the group stage only once until this week. 2024 will be our T20 Cricket World Cup annus horribilis on this front, and barring mathematical improbabilities and freakish results in the coming minutes from PNG. Yes, unfortunate. I'm Paul Ford, godfather of the Beige Brigade. I'm joined on this ignominious day by Dylan Cleaver, El Presidente of the Substack newsletter, The Bounce. DC, how did you enjoy yesterday's do-or-die game in San Fernando?
I really didn't enjoy it at all, Paul. But thanks for leading me into that. In fact, I wrote just to give my newsletter, The Bounce, a bit of a plug here. I wrote in The Bounce today that New Zealand took the piss out of this tournament, and the tournament ended up taking the piss out of New Zealand. And I see it's already been quoted somewhere, so it's obviously a line that's resonated with a couple of people, and that's honestly how I feel about it. You mentioned that 2009 tournament, and I barely remember it, but I think even back then, we were still trying to convince ourselves that T20 was just a flash in a pan, that it didn't really mean anything. It was that kind of, oh, yeah, who cares, you know? It was the sort of tournament that you'd happily take Brendan Diamante off to. But now we can't say that. I mean, sure, there's still a lot of us for which T20 is our least favourite of the formats, but you're naive in the extreme if you don't recognise its important part in the future of cricket's fabric, and in fact, as the financial driver of cricket. So, yeah, in summary, woeful. We got what we deserved.
Yeah, it was a very, very tough watch yesterday. It was tense. It was effectively a knockout game, with New Zealand now needing to surpass Afghanistan on the table to go through, and it's just, yeah. It's not going to happen, or it's extremely unlikely. And we'll probably almost know by the end of this podcast whether it's going to be a thing with Papua New Guinea needing to absolutely annihilate Afghanistan in their run chase for about 100, I think they got in the end. In terms of the conditions and the selections, I heard Luke Ronke talk about the surface, the pitch as being wavy, which is certainly an adjective I hadn't heard before. There was by Gary Stead standards, this was a knee-jerk response. There were 3 changes with Ravindra coming in for Chapman, with Neesham coming in for Bracewell, and Tim Southey, the wily old dog, coming in for Matt Henry. Still no room for Ish Sodhi. Before, or as you sat and watched that toss and saw those selections, Dylan, what did you think of what the New Zealanders were trying to do?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because on the surface, all those changes were justifiable. And in fact, you could have made a case for all 4 of those who missed out in Guyana to play in Trinidad. The problem with it is that it's a reflection of how poorly organised this campaign was, because they knew they had their big 2 games first up. The fact that they had to make all those changes is a reflection of the fact they got it badly wrong in their selections in the first one, and you cannot afford to do that when you're going in without any preparation. So, you know, Tim Southey played well. Jimmy Neesham bowled pretty well. Ration didn't have a great day, but really what it meant was you were taking out 3 players who might not have been in form, but at least they'd actually played a game of cricket in the Caribbean, and replacing them with 3 guys coming in cold. And again, that just speaks to me of a campaign that was neither here or there, harem scarum. But you can make a case for all of those changes being the right thing to do. It just, they should have been there from game 1 if that was the direction they thought they were going in.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, just the atmosphere, I've got to say, it was sensational. I mean, this is the spiritual home of West Indies short form cricket. Sensational, noisy drums, air horns. Looked like people were quite a few hammered people in the stands, just having an absolute hell of a time. Fully sold out, 8:30 start. Heaps of traffic issues apparently. People just storming their way out of is it Port of Spain to get down the, I don't know if it's a motorway, I assume it's down the coast. And of course, maybe it was me, I wrote down 1990s cricket in 1990s uniforms. The tale has come back to haunt us. In terms of what actually happened, of course, Kane Williamson winning the toss and electing to bowl. So again, New Zealand not having to have the dewy ball in their hand. West Indies got 149 for 9 with really, and we'll talk about him some more, Shafane Rutherford, the absolute standout batsman in this match. Trent Boult did very well, as did Tim Southee. The talisman, Nicholas Pooran, was the second top scorer with 17, which says something about it. And New Zealand, of course, a faltering chase, 136 for 9 off 20 overs. I think Joseph was excellent, and I'm sure you've got something to say about the spinners. But really, West Indies were in deep shit for so much of this innings. I mean, they were 1 for 1, 2 for 20, 3 for 21, and 4 for 22 when Rovman Powell was dismissed in the 6th over. And that was the moment that Shafane Rutherford came to the crease, 22 for 4 in the 6th over. That initial, well, maybe the opening stanza and the middle stanza of bowling for New Zealand. What were your thoughts on that, Dom?
Outstanding. I thought Trent Boult and Tim Southee looked like he was bowling with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. Almost a kind of message that, I'm the world record holder for wickets and T20 eyes. What the hell were you thinking leaving me out at Guyana? I thought he was outstanding. Look, it got even worse than 4 for 22 for the West Indies. They were 5 for 30. And then they just started to put together these niggly little partnerships. And this is where it got a little bit muddled. And it's quite a, I know T20's bash and crash in that, but it's quite a complex calculation that Kane Williamson then had to do. When the West Indies were losing those wickets, I think he banked very early on the fact that it was a seam-friendly pitch. It was go seam first, seam always if you've got the chance, and we're going to roll these guys in 12 overs. And maybe he was even had a little bit of net run rate calculations going on in his head as well, because, of course, just beating the West Indies still didn't guarantee New Zealand a place in the Super 8s. Their net run rate would quite likely come into consideration, particularly if the West Indies then went on a beat Afghanistan. But I'm getting hopelessly ahead of myself here. I think Kane Williamson tied himself up in knots by thinking, right, we're going to get these guys out. We're going to get these guys out before the 15th over. I'm going to use my 4 seamers. I'm going to park Mitchell Santner because I don't really like the left hand over the wicket to a left-hander batter and Shafane Rutherford. I don't like that matchup. Then hopefully I won't have to use it. And to be fair to Williamson, and who else was making those calculations, it was so nearly genius. West Indies got to 112 for 9. One more piece of good luck or one more piece of good cricket. West Indies are in the hutch for 112, and that is a target that is a hell of a lot more appetising than 150, which I always thought was at least 20 runs too many. But what were your thoughts when you were watching Daryl Mitchell, I guess, limbering up to bowl his first over of the match in the 19th over, knowing that the 20th over was going to have to be bowled by a spinner?
Whenever I see Daryl Mitchell warming up, I do think of you, because I know so many times you've said, if Daryl Mitchell's bowling, we are in deep, deep trouble, or we've made a bad decision. It was possibly, well, we weren't in deep trouble when he took the ball, to be honest, but we certainly were by the time he gave the ball back to the umpire. Look, I first of all, totally agree with you on the seamers. Boult, Southee, Lockie and Neesham combined for 49 dot balls out of their 96 deliveries. So effectively, we had their 16 overs went for 91. But unfortunately, those 4 overs from Mitchell, Santner, and Phillips cost 55. And of course, as you say, at least 2 of those were at the death. One bright shining light I thought was the fielding. I thought we looked like we'd kind of got our mojo back on that front. We took basically everything. The only drop was the rocket ship that hit Daryl Mitchell in the guts, and his blushes were saved 2 balls later when Pooran holed out. But yeah, look, when Mitchell came on, I was thinking, oh my God, is this a matchup obsession? And then I realised, oh no, they've fully gone for the kill here with the seam only attack, and it hasn't come off, and we've been caught short. I was immediately thinking back to the 19th over against Afghanistan where he went for 16. Gurbaz was still in. That felt like a hospital pass. I had a quick look just before we came on. Career bowling stats. Daryl Mitchell in T20 internationals, 17 overs, no maidens, 8 for 183. I mean, jeepers creepers. So more than 10 and over. It just seems like a crazy plan to rely on him, and pretty unfair. And as you say, it felt like, it was obvious that it wasn't a plan. It was through necessity. And that seam-only dogma seemed to be proven incorrect, and maybe that lack of faith in Mitchell Santner against, I totally understand the matchup thing, but I do wonder whether we're just getting a little bit kind of intoxicated by the statistics there. To give you one, Shafane's strike rate to left arm spin in his career is 180, but Daryl Mitchell went at a strike rate of 317. So what would you rather have? I mean, it's sort of this crazy thing where a good bowler like Santner has proven time and time again he can bowl good balls to all kinds of batsmen in all kinds of conditions, maybe except for a death over situation. So yeah, I winced, Dylan.
Do you know the one thing I would say as some form of devil's advocacy is that I think Mitchell Santner is one of our great white ball bowlers. I think he will go down as one of our great white ball bowlers. But and this is anecdotal, I have got no stats beside me to back this up, but I actually think he's a better good pitch bowler than he is a poor pitch bowler. And what I mean by that is he spends an inordinate amount of his overs, I feel, trying to outfox the batter, trying to get inside the batter's head, anticipate what the batter wants to do, and then bowl a ball accordingly. And so you get these amazing changes of pace across his 6 balls of any given over in T20. I think on a wicket like that, you just bowl your best ball over and over and over again. And I found it, and that's what the West Indies spinners did. And I find Santner in these type of conditions very frustrating sometimes, where batters are almost waiting on his variation, his big loopy one, or his rocket arm ball. I really felt like reaching through the television and shaking him and just saying, just bowl good balls. It's all you need to do on this wicket. So that would be my one, perhaps, a reason why I kind of felt that Williamson might have been reluctant to use Santner earlier, which was a mistake. I mean, he should have, but that may be factoring into his decision a little bit.
Yeah. And obviously we're talking in hindsight because that's what we do. I mean, I think the other person that we should talk about is Shafane Rutherford. I mean, he changed the game, the 25-year-old Guyanese all-rounder. He's been playing he played the Pakistan domestic T20 competition. He was in the Kolkata Knight Riders in the IPL. Didn't play a game, I don't think, this year. It's sort of on the bench, like a lot of the New Zealanders. And as we mentioned before, he came in the West Indies with 22 for 4 in the 6th over. And it was interesting, he played an innings of multiple gears. He was happy to hang around. And he had done the maths, the interviews with him after. He said he was patiently waiting for the top draw New Zealand seamers to bowl out. He thought if they could survive that, then an opportunity would emerge. Well, he did the bowling maths superbly, and then he farmed the strike magnificently in those last 2 overs. And I saw a stat which said it was the highest 10th wicket partnership in T20 World Cup. So it was 37 off 13, and Gudakesh Modi contributed 0 runs to that partnership, which is quite amazing. And I think what I would say about Rutherford as well is that he's not just a Andre Russell slogger. He's a genuine batsman who plays good cricket shots, not just a basher and a bludgeoner. He's been in the shadows a bit, and it was a real coming-of-age innings.
Yeah, I heard Colin Munro, who has played with and against him in franchise cricket around the world, saying he's very different to a lot of West Indian batters, in that he doesn't just try to access the leg side boundary. He's more than happy to go the other way and open up and go over the offside, which, was on full display. 68 not out, 39 deliveries, and you're right, it was a slow burner to get himself into a position where he could launch, and 6 sixes is a pretty tremendous, and in the end, utterly match-winning knock. That he was the difference between the two teams, full stop.
So the West Indies struggled and then surprised their way to 149 for 9. We'll be back shortly. We'll have dig into this New Zealand run chase. Welcome back to the BYC. And Dylan, what were your thoughts on this New Zealand run chase? I mean, Finn Allen got a few. There was a bit of rust about, I'd suggest. But my overall impressions were no real momentum in the innings.
Yeah, that's dead right. Look, I feel like I'm saying to pick on Devon Conway. So before I say this, I would like to say that he sorted out his keeping. He nearly made a mess of the Skyer, but he grabbed it, which was important. And then the third catch that he took was a genuinely good wicketkeeper's catch, whether you are a part-timer or whether you're the reincarnation of Ian Smith, who I should point out is not yet dead. But
on that Skyer, I was just going to say there was a bit of a kerfuffle around that. I don't know if you clocked it, but there was a bit of speculation that the ball had hit the spider cam wires, and there was a bit of drama about that. And I don't know whether its proximity to those wires had stuffed up Conway's run as well. But yeah, one of those things where another little piece of weirdness that you see in every single game of cricket.
Yeah, so his keeping was good, and I was hoping the confidence he might have gained from that flowed onto his batting. But again, just a very stilted, uncomfortable little stay that ended with a top edge sweep attempt, if I remember rightly, off a Sane. And the problem was that Finn Allen did what we've asked him to do, which is to get through the tough patch and not try to hit every ball for 6 if you can't do it. The only problem with him playing quite sensibly is that you're right, there was no momentum. There was nothing coming from the other end. Ratchin wasn't going over the top and taking the pressure off him. And he ended up, playing a very pleasant chip shot straight down the throat of the mid-wicket boundary. Kane Williamson did his second game in a row, and Kane Williamson might be just about the most intelligent cricketer that I've ever seen in the way he sorts out his own game and situations. But that's twice in a row he's gone out trying to back cut a spinner in tricky conditions with a slip in place. This time he didn't even get it to the slip. It was a finer edge and went to the keeper. And the look of horror on his face, I think, was quite a good picture of where his mind might be at the moment. Daryl Mitchell, James Neesham, neither of them could get any momentum at all. And Glenn Phillips, although his numbers look pretty good at the end, he also struggled to get going. So, yeah, it was a chase that always felt ankle deep in mud.
A quagmire chase. I've got to say that delivery, the delivery that Mitchell got was an absolute beauty. Sort of floated up full length, drifted in, and then around the bat and just clipped that off stump. It was beautifully bowled from. It was Moti, I think, wasn't it, that one?
Mitchell was bowled by Moti, yeah.
Yeah. And
good catch, Moti.
I thought that Hossain, Akil Hossain Source and Gurgesh Moti, they took 4 for 46 off their 8 overs, the left arm spinners, and they're tricky customers on good wickets, and with a bit of a wavy pitch to play with, I thought that they were excellent. And I saw a statistic, I think it was in Crick Info, which said that New Zealand have now lost the joint most wickets to spin in the World Cup, level with Uganda, which is an ominous statistic. And I'm sure that there's a matches played thing that we could mess about with there. But I guess a few warning signs, or not even warning signs, just sort of red alerts around how we play tricky spin.
Yeah, and again, maybe an indictment on the fact that we decided it was a seam pitch only.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. It was And, there are a few other things that caught my eye around it. One was that Glenn Phillips is the only New Zealand batsman to have faced more than 25 balls in the tournament so far, which is a frightening statistic. And the biggest partnership New Zealand has put on is 23 in this Cricket World Cup. Mate, is that top order, perhaps? I'm not quite sure. There was quite a humorous moment when the satellite outage came in, just as things were really getting completely and utterly impossible. It did feel like the TV gods were invoking some sort of mercy law, with New Zealand needing, I think, about 21 runs and over at that point. The other thing about just looking at the raw numbers with, New Zealand, they're reaching 136 for 9 and falling 13 runs short sort of makes it sound closer than it actually was, I think. And,
correct.
And I think that the Satna fireworks at the end were sort of saved embarrassment, but New Zealand was significantly short in this run chase.
Yeah, I didn't see the Santa fireworks either because I had stuff to do. And once that satellite outage came, I was following it on the ball by ball on my phone, and yeah, so I have not seen Santa's 3 sixes, but I'll take advice on them if they were superb shots, slogs, chips.
No, they were good shots, followed by some of the least the least celebrated sixes in history, and the most blasé. But the bowler not even reacting to them and just going straight back to the top of his mark and getting hit for another 6, and then rinse and repeat. Just a very much some quite callous kind of cricket there at the end. No one giving 2 shits really, and West Indies got it done. It was party time in the stands, and the punishing air horns. Oh my God, they really got going there at the end. And I've got to say, when there's a World Cup, I never want the home team to get out. I want the home team to at least make the final. I think that would be wonderful. So I've got no beef with the West Indies. There was no controversy in this game. We were beaten fair and square. And as I say, I'd be quite happy for Afghanistan not to make it through at New Zealand. Afghanistan not to make it through in New Zealand to take them out. But it's just not to be. And so I guess looking ahead, DC, we've got Uganda and Papua New Guinea in the short term. We're no chance of qualifying, are we? I mean, I think.
No, I don't think so. Is it a
mathematical kind of a scenario?
As I look at this now, Afghanistan are 32 for 2 after 5 overs, chasing 95 to beat PNG. So, I mean, there's potentially some trickiness there, but even still, I don't think it matters. And I mean, can you imagine a more joyful scenario than going into the Caribbean to play a tournament and ending up with 2 dead rubbers against Uganda and Papua New Guinea to finish your tournament? And what worries me is that, and this might come out sounding the wrong way, I don't want it to be, but what worries me is they'll go and smash those 2 teams, and they'll come home and there'll be those little panels you have in the newspaper with their stats done, averages such and such, and a lot of the players will look quite reasonable. And in 10 years' time, when you look at the stats for the 2024 World T20, you say, oh, such and such had a good tournament. And it'll be very hard to explain to them that, no, those are pointless numbers. They mean nothing.
Double dead rubber. Yeah, I just had a quick look. It does look like there's a sort of a watery, hopeless chance here because both Gurbaz and Zadran are out, the openers for Afghanistan. So it's not completely over, but it's looking extremely unlikely. Just as a reminder, New Zealand, so West Indies are through. For New Zealand to qualify, they'd have to get past Afghanistan. Afghanistan are currently playing the PNG Barramundis, and it looks pretty unlikely that there's going to be an upset in that game. So that would basically mean we're stuffed. If the unthinkable did happen, we'd still need to annihilate Uganda and Papua New Guinea. Just to give you a hypothetical scenario, Afghanistan would need to lose their last 2 games by something like 100 runs combined, and New Zealand would have to win their last 2 games by the feasible amount of about 200 runs. So, look, I just think we can start to
draw a line under this.
We can lament. Yeah. And Dylan, I think we've heard some excuses, and there's been some interesting. There was an interesting interview this morning with Gary Stead on Radio New Zealand where he sort of talked about we did as much as was possible based on what it was. I wouldn't say it was weasel words, but
can I read that
insinuation that. Yeah, you can. There was an insinuation that he wasn't in full control of that situation. Is that fair?
Yes, that's exactly right. Radio New Zealand's morning report asked him about his future, and Gary said, to quote, "That's a question you should be asking other people. I can look at myself in the mirror and know that the preparation we tried to put in place has been as good as what's capable of. And all I can do is try and prepare the players to be ready for the games." It's very curious. It's enigmatic. It's probably a little level of cryptic in there. But there are a few whispers that I mean, jeepers, is it responsible of us to say what some of those whispers are? But why not? It's our podcast. We can do what we want. There are whispers that this was purely player-driven, this turning up to the Caribbean late, and that whereas other teams seem to have been quite happy to assemble straight after the IPL, New Zealand didn't want to. I don't know if that's 100% true, but there's certainly been some talk around the traps of that being the case.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's definitely some complexities. I think that certainly the question about his future, I've heard him say words to that effect before, and as he says, he would. I'm sure it's not really up to him to say whether he's the right person going forward. He just puts his name in the hat, applies, gets
he's got 2 more years.
Not.
He's got 2 more years, so it's a payout if they decide to move on from him.
Yeah, so it'd be sort of nuts for him to go on there and say, "Oh no, I don't know. I don't think I am. I think I've pretty much had enough." It just seems he's not going to do that in the middle of a tournament. Even after those 2 crappy results. First of all, good on New Zealand cricket for putting him up, and good on Gary Stead for doing the interview, because I think that's a credit to them, and fronting up and all of those good things. And Luke Ronke was on Sky this week, and he asked, last night, and he answered a bunch of difficult questions as well. So I do think that's good on them for that. In terms of that preparation piece, it does sound like yes. Whether the player thing is right or wrong, that's certainly something worth digging into. West Indies is also a notoriously difficult place to get the practice facilities are a bit shitty. The tournament itself has got some really complicated logistics, but could more have been done? I guess that's the question that'll come out in a review. But it does seem like, for one reason and another, maybe multiple reasons, we just looked so undercooked, as has been talked about ad nauseum.
Yeah.
One excuse we don't have is that we didn't have to play in New York. I mean, any team that's got through playing cricket on that pitch, extraordinary. What I would say, and I did check this just before we came on here, the draw came out in early January 2024. I think it was the 5th of January. So it's literally 5 months that we would have had to prepare ahead of this tournament. Does seem like we could have perhaps set up a base a bit earlier and got the guys that weren't in the IPL out there. Could we have been playing some cricket around the Caribbean just to get attuned? I think there may have been some opportunities to do something different there.
There's also something that's been bugging me a little bit about this, and that is the kind of negative noises that were coming out of the camp almost from day one. Like the narrative was, we've been so disrupted. I think Mitchell Santner used the word distorted build-up. Gary said before that second match, spent a lot of time lamenting the state of the nets that they had to practice. It was this sort of pre-cooked in or pre-built in excuses that I haven't really heard a top-level New Zealand team since that All Black side that went to Europe in COVID and were complaining before they lost to France and Ireland about how long away they'd been from home, and they genuinely had been away from home for a long time too. But I know that rubbed people up the wrong way as well.
The other thing I was just going to mention, just on expectation setting specifically, it is interesting how our expectations have changed. I mean, this team has had a lot of success for a lot of years, and I'm sure it would always be disappointing for New Zealand to go out of the group stage, don't get me wrong, but there was almost not I think that a lot of people had an expectation New Zealand would get through to the semi-finals. And that is something that the team has earned over the last 15 years with some of the fantastic results they've had, particularly in world tournaments.
Yeah, good point.
DC,
well, mate.
I'm just going to go, I think we'll just go punch the wall respectively, and we'll come back shortly and just rattle through a few of the other results from around the grounds at the ICC T20 Cricket World Cup. Welcome back to the BYC. Dylan Cleaver and Paul Ford chewing your ear off. Hopefully we haven't been too sad. We are a little bit gloomy, no doubt about it. We're going to move on now away from some of those New Zealand games and just sort of rattle through a couple of the other results. South Africa beat Bangladesh in a tight one, DC, getting home by 4 runs.
Yeah, defending 113 on the notorious Long Island Sound wicket that we've mentioned ad nauseum.
Yes. I tell you what, they nearly got home. They needed a 6. They needed 6 off the last 2 balls, and Mahmudullah smoked one. And I reckon it was about 1 foot away from being over the rope and over Aiden Markram, but Aiden Markram caught it, and Maharaj managed to defend 11 off that final over. So South Africa got home. They've done bloody well to sneak their way through. They've had 3 games in New York, and they've got out of jail on all of those games. So yeah. I think they're a smoky for this tournament. Canada did well. Didn't embarrass themselves against Pakistan, but Pakistan got home comfortably in that one. They won by 7 wickets with 15 balls remaining. Canada just not enjoying the heat from the Pakistan bowlers from some of the highlights that I saw. Kudos to Aaron Johnson, a 44-ball 52. Pretty damn good from him.
Yeah, he's been a revelation.
Nepal and Sri Lanka was abandoned without a ball being bowled. I love watching Nepal, so I was gutted about that. I see Lama Shane, or whatever his name is. He is in he is over there. He's joined the squad, so look out for him.
Once they left the United States, I think he joined the squad because he couldn't get a visa for the States. So when they moved to the West Indian portion, he joined the team.
Right. Yes, that makes sense. Australia absolutely disemboweling in Namibia. Namibia 72 all out in Australia, getting home in 5.4 overs without Mitchell Starc as well. My God.
Yeah, they had somewhere to go.
Yeah, frightening. A game I actually really enjoyed was USA 110 for 8. And they had India in trouble chasing 111, chasing the Nelson, and they did get home by 7 wickets with 10 balls remaining. But that was tight at times, that match.
Yeah, and Coldie's having a little bit of a Kane Williamson tournament today, doesn't he? 3 games, I mean, admittedly, all in difficult conditions, but 3 games, 3 single-figure scores, including a first ball duck. So hasn't been his tournament to date.
He looks like he can't wait to get out of the New York, that's for sure. Indian captain Rohit Sharma had another blowout. There was the interesting thing about this one was the penalty runs. So in the run chase, India needed 35 off 30 balls, and because the USA had taken and been warned a couple of times about how long they were taking to set their fields, of course, they had a fill-in captain. Their captain was out injured, and then they got the equation. They got penalised 5 runs, and it went from 35 off 30 to 30 off 30 at an absolute crucial moment. I thought that was pretty rough, to be honest.
Yeah. I didn't see it live. I've only heard about it since, so I can't comment on it as if I was watching it, and and it blew me away at the time. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm glad that they're trying to speed the game up. I think it's important that cricket tries to be better, certainly over rates, and certainly speeding the game up in this new sportotainment world. But it's just, I mean, surely there's got to be some leeway for minnows playing against the most powerful cricketing nation on earth.
Well, that's the thing, and I don't want to dwell on it, but, there is already a penalty in the form of if you're behind time with your overs, you have fielding restrictions put on you in the death. And so there's not a hell of a lot of advantage. You can see that the captain was desperately trying to work it all out, and it was probably in a situation where he's like, oh my God, this is way close. This is like what we sort of dreamed about. And this fantasy situation was coming into reality. And then his mucking about, or his fielders not being good at listening, or whatever you want to call it, ended up being a bit of it was just a pivotal moment that just really put a ding in their hopes at that exact at that time. Bangladesh, I was surprised about this one. Bangladesh got home by 25 runs against the Netherlands, and it was disappointing that Shakib Al Hassan found some form.
Yeah, I actually wasn't surprised by this. I thought some of these conditions are playing into Bangladesh's hands. Is that it for the men in orange? I think it probably is, isn't it? They've lost to South Africa and Bangladesh now. Bangladesh has actually been pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, there you have it. Bangladesh are going to go through and New Zealand aren't.
And then another absolute drubbing this morning. Oman, 47 all out, looking very, very scared of Mark Wood and being outspun as well. And Adil Rashid, possibly I think he's the number one T20 bowler in the world, and he was absolutely all over them. He took 4 for 11. Then England mowed it down off 19 balls. This one was over pretty much while I ate my cornflakes.
Yeah, it was quite incredible to watch, really, that they mowed it down on 19 balls and still had time to lose 2 wickets.
Yeah, it was one of those crazy games, kind of like the games that we're hopefully the Tailcats will have over the next couple of days against Papua New Guinea and against Uganda. Just reporting in Afghanistan 54 for 2, looking good now against Papua New Guinea. Hey, look, just before we go, DC, did just want to touch on a couple of little bits and pieces. There is this chat around the format, one loss, one rain out against a team that you're expected to beat and you're in trouble. And I guess this has come to light. And I think they were tongue-in-cheek comments from Josh Hazlewood, sort of talking about how the Australians may just try and do a bit of a go slow against Scotland and try and engineer things to see England ejected. It's this weird thing where that game that got rained out, England's game against Scotland, yes, sure, Scotland were going well, but it does feel a little bit like, arguably a little bit unfair.
Yeah, I think Scotland got ripped off in that game. 90 for naught after 10, weren't they? They were going great guns. Yeah. I mean, that is always the problem if you don't build in reserve days, and I don't think you can at this early stage of the tournament. Talk about logistical nightmares. That would certainly offer up a few, particularly when you're using a limited amount of venues. So it's what can you do? New Zealand has benefited from rain at major tournaments before. Most notably, their rain out against India at the 2019 World Cup in pool play probably saved New Zealand and got them into those semi-finals. So it's just part and parcel of what you get with cricket. I don't think we can overthink it.
Yeah, a little bit of luck, but as you say, none of it affecting New Zealand, of course. As I said before, didn't then have to play at the quasi New York venue on Long Island, that ropey, unsafe, inconsistent pitch. I did see that if England beat Namibia on Saturday, basically, if they beat Namibia comfortably, given what happened today, England should be sweet as, unless Australia lose to Scotland. So that will be a real test of how committed the Australians are to making sure eject if they send out a team to maybe bat with the wrong hand and bowl with blindfolds. But yes, I guess from a New Zealand point of view, and we should head out of the building and go drown our sorrows.
I've got breaking news.
New Zealand's hopes.
Breaking news as we go. There is hope. The Afghanistan, of course, by the time you all listen to this, it'll be long determined. But as we leave this particular episode, Afghanistan have just lost the wicket of Omarzai for 13 off a painstaking 18 balls. And Afghanistan are limping a little towards 96 at 55 for 3.
Wow. Goodness me. It couldn't, could it? It couldn't. And of course, depending on what happens in that match, all New Zealand hopes will now be pinned on Corey Anderson. Of course, one of only, I think, 5 players that have represented 2 countries at the T20 World Cup. Angry little roller van der Merwe, the skier, Dirk Nannes, our very own Mark Chapman, and David Visa, the Colossus from Namibia, but actually from South Africa. DC, I think that's us.
That should be us. Thank you very much, Paul.
Yeah, good stuff. Let's go back to punching some walls and sobbing into our Sky TV remotes. Thanks for joining us for a somber and cathartic BYC podcast today. And God bless you if you take time out of your weekend to watch the Teal Caps versus the Uganda Cricket Cranes on Saturday afternoon. And you can call yourself a full cricket nuffy if you're going to interrupt your slumber and stay up and get steamed for the Tuesday 2:30 a.m. probable dead rubber between the Teal Caps and the Kumul Petroleum-sponsored Barramundis from Papua New Guinea. We'll be back next week sometime. And in the meantime, if you have anything to get off your inflamed, phlegmatic, raging chest, send us a short diatribe to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz. Ka kite and kia kaha.